So hi everyone, I am Maha and I go by any pronouns. So today's topic for this workshop is Klinefelter syndrome. Now the reason why I decided to go with this topic was because it's important for us to understand the difference between sex and gender, to understand that sex and gender isn't necessarily binary. It doesn't come in binary form. It is not either this or that. It's neither doesn't exist in 0101 sequence. Rather, we in the science, we in science, like in the scientific field, have developed sort of binary codes to everything in order to categorize people more easily and to understand better. However, Klinefelter syndrome is a syndrome that proves otherwise, that proves that no sex isn't binary, no gender isn't binary. It's just constructs made to understand humans better, but in the end, it's not helpful to those who are born with those variants, with those ambiguities. So, moving on, I'll just talk about it. Now, what is DSD? DSD is differences in sex development. It's a group of rare conditions involving genes, hormones, and reproductive organs, including genitals. It means a person's sex development is different to most other people's. Now, normal sex development will be categorized as male or female, right? So we often look at male and female as psychological or physiological forms rather than looking at it psychologically as well. So we try to embody the male and female perspective in terms of the body parts they give. But recently, we have sort of encountered or factored in the psychology, the psychological perspective. Sorry, yeah. So the psychological perspective, the sort of perspective that says that it's not only physiological embodiment that matters, it's your psychological thinking as well that matters, which again defies the binary sex, norm, and gender. So moving on, Klinefelter syndrome is a result of four more X chromosomes in a phenotypic male. So this is a condition that's affecting males. In 1942, Dr. Harry Klinefelter and his co-workers first recognized the combination of features that had come to be recognized in Klinefelter syndrome. Now, to understand those features, we'll look at the symptoms because this is not much of a disease as it is a syndrome. Syndrome is a bunch of symptoms you observe in a person, right? And since this is genetic or like it could be caused due to genes, hormones, reproductive organs, but this mostly affects your genetic code. So we know according to science, women have 46XX and men have 46XY. But in Klinefelter syndrome, they have an additional X chromosome. So they have 47 chromosomes and it's XXY or XXXY. It really depends on the number of chromosomes that add. But to identify this sort of thing, it's very difficult to identify whether or not it's a Klinefelter syndrome. A lot of men go their entire livelihoods without ever recognizing it to be a problem because those symptoms are uncommon, but the syndrome itself, but the existence of additional X chromosome, that's common. The syndrome, however, isn't, but I'll talk about that later. So, yeah, although XXY is common, the syndrome itself is uncommon. Again, XXY can be common because it can go unrecognized as a normal functioning male wouldn't be sort of tested for their genes, right? Now, clinical phenotype in Klinefelter syndrome was first described in males with tall stature, small testes, gynecomastia is enlargement of breast, and zoospermia, a zoospermia with the genetic etiology. Etiology is causes. It's a scientific name for causes of supernumerary X chromosomes identified in 1959. Many men live out their entire lives without ever suspecting that they have an additional chromosome. Now, when it was described more than 40 years ago, it was thought to be an endocrine disorder. So, usually, when Klinefelter syndrome does occur in a lot of males, and when they sort of don't know what's going on, it is best advised that you approach an endocrinologist regarding this syndrome because they specialize in these kind of things, even though it's not an endocrine. Endocrine is what? Endocrine has something to do with hormones, right? So your typical male functioning, if it seems peculiar to you, it's wise to um, approach a doctor or an endocrinologist. An endocrinologist is preferred. Now, what are the symptoms? Now, here we're looking at symptoms is phenotypic changes occurring in male, which means these are characteristics which you can pinpoint and see. And then you would recognize the genotype, which is the XXY or the triple XY or the quad XY. It really depends. So, Klinefelter syndrome does not usually show any of the symptoms early in childhood, but later symptoms may be difficult to spot. Many boys and men don't realize they have it. Possible features are not always present, but they may include learning how to sit up, crawl, talk, and walk later than usual, being quieter, more passive. In childhood, we can say shyness, low self confidence, problems with reading, writing, spelling, paying attention, mild dyslexia, dyspraxia, low energy levels, and difficulty socializing or expressing feelings. Now you can see the anatomy of, not the anatomy, of course, just the typical symptoms of a man on the side. So now in teenagers growing taller than expected for the family, broad hips, poor muscle tone, slower than usual muscle growth, reduced facial and body hair grows later on, small penis and testicles, and enlarged breast, again, gynecomastia. Um, in adulthood, inability to have children naturally, infertility, and low sex drive, in addition to physical characteristics mentioned above. Now, see, in adulthood, a lot of men, it is when they a lot of men that come to adulthood, they realize that they can't sort of perform sexually. They have low sex drive. So, this sort of infertility, it doesn't mean that men with Klinefelter syndrome cannot have children. They can, but they need assisted reproductive technologies to help them. Something like testicular sperm extraction, which is TESE, or intercytoplasmic insemination, where we're gonna sort of increase sperm count or work on sperm produced by men with Klinefelter syndrome and then inject it into the cytoplasm of the embryo, IVF method, of course. So now let's talk about the causes. It's caused by an addition X chromosome, which we discussed. It carries extra copies of genes, which interferes with development of testicles, and this means that they produce less testosterone than usual. Now, the extra genetic information will be either carried by in every cell or may only affect some cells. This is known as mosaic. Mosaic. I'm gonna go with mosaic. Just like correct me at the end. I just like fill out a form and let me know if I'm pronouncing it wrong. But I'm gonna go with mosaic. Klinefelter syndrome. Yeah. Now, Klinefelter syndrome is not directly inherited. It occurs as a result of either mother's egg or father's sperm having an extra X chromosome. So after conception, the chromosome pattern is XXY rather than XY. Now let's talk about this here. It is not a genetic condition. I'm sorry if I did not make this clear earlier, but Klinefelter syndrome is not a genetic disorder because you are not sort of passing it on to your offspring, nor are you acquiring it from your parents. It happens when your embryo it happens during fertilization. When your meiosis 1, meiosis 2 occurs, either in males or females, really depends. If it occurs in males, it's XYY, occurs in females, XXY, or really XXY could also come from males. There are a lot of hypotheses around it. I'd say that it occurs due to non-disjunction in meiosis 1 or meiosis 2. Again, there's just so much micro differences between how Klinefelter syndrome can occur. So it happens when fertilization is occurring. So there's sort of a mutation that's being created. There's a mutation in your your typical genetic code would be 46XY, 46XX, but it's coming 47 because you're adding a chromosome. There's similar conditions, there's similar chromosomal disorders. This is a chromosomal disorder because it's occurring when chromosomes are formed, right? When you're establishing a genetic code for your offspring, for your future offspring, that embryo is being created. However, that embryo that embryo, sorry, has um, has a different genetic code, and it's due to mutations occurring in meiosis, in the process of meiosis one or meiosis two. Now, you see, there are other chromosomal disorders. We could always talk about the Turner syndrome. Turner syndrome affects females. It's when the Y chromosome is missing. So again, a lot of people sort of um, associate that to infertility as well. But there's a lot of research work going on around it, and I cannot speak further on it because I haven't. I'm under research on that part. Now, diagnosis. Diagnosis, how do you identify Klinefelter syndrome? How do doctors identify Klinefelter syndrome? So your doctor will start with a physical exam, question you about symptoms, general health. Simple tests such as even a cheek swab test to test your DNA and see what your genetic code is. That does it. Chromosome analysis, karyotype analysis, blood test, cheek swab test. Simple as that. They just need a DNA. Hormone tests, they check hormone levels in your blood and urine. Earlier it was, again, coming back to the slide, earlier it was considered to be an endocrine disorder, because we didn't have that level of depth or understanding in the past where we could tell that there is something wrong with the genetic code. So the only way to figure out whether or not it was syndrome is through phenotypic features or physical characteristics that could be seen. So hormones were usually associated with the symptoms or the symptoms that occur in males. So do check hormone levels in your blood and urine. Of course, low testosterone is a sign of Klinefelter syndrome. So it's rare, of course, this is very rare condition, of course, but it's not something that can be denied now, is it? So hormone levels in your blood and urine makes sense. There is no cure for Klinefelter syndrome. Again, it's mutation caused in during fertilization, so there is no cure for Klinefelter syndrome. But some of the problems associated with condition can be treated if necessary. Possible treatments include testosterone replacement therapy, speech and language therapy during childhood to help with speech development, educational behavioral support, occupational therapy with coordination problems like dyspraxia, associated with dyspraxia, physiotherapy to help build muscle, increase strength, psychological support, fertility treatment, again, intracytoplasmic. I apologize for my misuse of the word. It's intracytoplasmic sperm injection, not inter. Sperm was removed during a small operation to fertilize an egg in the laboratory. Breast reduction tissue to remove excess breast tissue. Now, all of these are just measures to sort of help with the symptoms that occur due to it. So you can't really cure the symptom because it's again chromosomal disorder. I keep coming back to that. So yeah, that's it. Just a second though. Oh wait, have I paused my? Wait, no, I haven't paused my recording. So it is mosaic. I just had to go and just search that up. That is it. Thank you so much for paying attention, guys, if you did actually pay attention. But thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a nice day ahead. Thank you. Bye bye.